What it do, comic babies? I'm Bunkmaster B, and today we are talking about the 5 best comics of all time. That sounds like a pretty crazy ask. I mean, we're talking about the 5 best comics of all time. How do you even quantify that? Well, I did it. This is the unobjectionable 5 best comics of all time. We interrupt this video to bring you a breaking news bulletin. We take you to the action already in progress. Sorry, comic babies. We interrupt this special video with something that's even more special. Coming up right now is a video that is 25 years in the making. If you went back and you watched my 5 comic challenge video, you heard that I ended by talking about maybe the most important single comic to me, which is Captain America number 8, which was a Mark Waid comic that I talk about as being my first comic ever. And in that, I talk about how that particular comic was part 2 of a 4-part crossover, and how probably wasn't a very good comic to be my first comic ever, but how it was and how much that comic meant to me. And because I have people who are way better to me than I deserve, as far as viewers, as far as friends, as far as any of that. On that video, I had one of the people who watched that, goes by New Spooie. I'll put a link right here because that guy is an amazing digital archivist, and if you've ever watched any kind of G4 or old Tech TV content, there's a good chance he's preserved it and has it going here. But he was also a big fan of these comics in the 90s, and he asked me, hey, do you still have your old issues of that? And I told him, no, unfortunately I don't. I got rid of those. And I didn't think much of it. And then a few months later, and by a few months I mean like maybe a few weeks because he's on the ball, unlike me, I opened my mail, and what should I find but a package that contains, right here, Captain America number 8 by Mark Waid and Andy Kubert. This is the comic that I talked about. This is my first comic. This meant a ton to me right here because I did not have this anymore. And again, this is a beautiful, beautiful copy. I have the omnibus. I didn't have this. Now, this on its own would have meant so much to me. But Spooie's a real trickster. And he's a real sentimental guy and a stand-up act. So Spooie didn't just send me a copy of my first comic ever and one of the 5 most important comics to me. No. He sent me the other 3 parts of Live, Kree or Die. So after 25 years, I have finally read all 4 parts of the Live, Kree or Die story. Because if you watch that original video, I talked about how this right here, the comic I talk about as being my first comic, Captain America number 8, is, I'm bad at this, number 2 of 4 of Live, Kree or Die. I never had any of the others. I never got to read them, so I didn't know what happened with it. But thanks to Spooie, I have read Live, Kree or Die. And for the first time on this channel, I am going to give you an entirely spoiler recap of this event. So, spoiler warning, if you do not want a 4-part crossover of no particular consequence from 25 years ago spoiled, go ahead and click off now. But if you are brave enough to soldier through and find out what happened in a minor crossover event that no one remembers from 25 years ago, go ahead and check this out. So Live, Kree or Die is a 4-part series that crosses over between 4 different titles. And the first of which is Iron Man number 7. And it was written by Kurt Busiek. I did not know that Kurt Busiek ever wrote Iron Man. I consider myself a big Kurt Busiek fan. So this was super exciting for me to go ahead and get this, because Kurt Busiek is kind of exactly my kind of superhero comic writer. He writes the kind of superhero comics I like. Kind of that Astro City type where it's a lot more introspective. It's about the heroes as personalities. It's about the people underneath the mask. I kind of love that thing, and so I was super into this. And so this story kind of sets the tone from us. First off, I have to give a huge shout out to this ad right here, because you're going to see this all throughout. This was all over, and I remember this so much right here. So you're going to see that there are advertisements for the 1998 Oreo stacking contest, where you can win a trip to Universal Studios in Florida. My favorite part is that the top prize is you can win a $20,000 savings bond. Not just $20,000, but this was a time that you wanted that savings bond. Is it a Series I? They don't say. But it's a savings bond, and that's something that you want. It's going to be a long time before that's anything that people are really clamoring for. But anyway. So the series starts out, and we get a Kree faction called the Lunatic Legion. And they are going out, and they are reviving the supreme intelligence of the Kree. And they're basically a fanatical faction where they are basically declaring vengeance on the people of Earth for destroying the supreme intelligence. And they're basically saying that you killed our high intelligence point, we're going to do the same to you. So their entire mission is the extermination of the human race, which is pretty grim. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, you can see right there, the vengeance of the Kree against the cowardly dogs of Earth. And it goes through there. So we get this very high-minded concept. But actually, what this really all is a story about Carol Danvers. This whole thing might as well not even be about the Kree, because this is about Carol Danvers at a time when she is most vulnerable. So Iron Man comes up. She is hanging out here in Beverly, just north of Boston. Goes to see her. She's having a tough time. She's hanging out at her mom's house. And Iron Man comes and visits her and notices that she has 1, 2, 3 beer bottles hanging out in her room. And this sets off a whole thing where, depending on which writer is talking about it, depends on how deftly they're handling it. But Carol's going through a tough time. Tony, as very famously a former addict, former alcoholic, is noticing that she might be looking for coping mechanisms. And she's basically deciding, she's saying, hey, yeah, I'm going through a bad time. Sure, I take a drink or two. I've earned it. But it doesn't affect me. Not for long. The energy in my metabolism burns it off right away. Her half-Kree genetics make it so that she digests alcohol a different way. And this is where it sets up that this is going to be a character story about Carol Danvers at a time when she is, to this point, really at her lowest. And I think that's super interesting. And then we get into a situation where it has to tie back to the whole Live, Kree or Die. And again, Kurt Busiek is a great writer, and so he does some really interesting things here, where Tony is now going back to his business point. He is checking in on an old colleague of his who there may be some connection to the Kree there. And he's talking to her about what that connection might be. At this point, Carol, because it's a superhero comic, comes in and she confronts him and is very, very direct. And Tony is, Warbird, this isn't the way. Can't you see? You're resorting to violence, that it does no good. And then, of course, she realizes, oh no, I've been drunk. Oh God, what am I doing? Tony, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to. However, this all forces the Kree, who was clients of Tony's former protege, out to the front, where it turns out that she was developing a reactor for them. By the way, get used to this Blasto advertisement, because you're going to see that a lot. And then we get in a confrontation where suddenly this Kree conspiracy comes to the forefront. We get this super awesome mullet right there. It's the 90s. Mullets are sweet, so we get that. But basically, Tony and Warbird have to fight against these Kree. And it turns out Carol doesn't do a great job. She gets the best taken advantage of her. The Kree end up getting away with this power generator. Carol has to go off against them. Tony has to stay behind to save the innocent people. And that's the end of Part 1 of Live, Kree or Die. Part 2, if you watched any of my videos, might be a little bit familiar. This is Captain America number 8 that I've mentioned here before. I'm going to go by this one fairly quickly because I have talked about it before. This is where we get those allusions to the World War II gas camps. And it gets pretty dark here. So this is where we see the second part of the Kree plan. So I swear it's not as dark as it seems, because again, in this first part, it talks about there is no hope. During World War II, the Nazis were basically gassing people, hurting them in gas chambers. It goes all through that, and then it says that was during World War II, this is 1998. And basically says, hey, you know those things that were happening before? Happening again. So, again, I don't want to spend too much time on it. This is during a time when Cap is kind of rediscovering himself. He's trying to figure out, what does Captain America mean in the 90s? Is he a toy? Is he a symbol? You know, is he a brand? What is Captain America supposed to be during all of this time? And so he breaks up this arson attempt right here. Ties into a previous story attempt. But we flash over. We get Carol trying to fight off the Lunatic Legion here. She calls in Steve, says, hey, I need you to come. I'm fighting here. Cap comes out. She says that she has already called for previous reinforcements. She's fighting by herself. They end up getting her in here. We see these people being gassed. At this point, we don't know what that gas is, but it's pretty bleak. And then again, we get this amazing double-page spread of Cap breaking through, coming in, getting her out. And then at this point, what we find out is what that gas is. That's Terrigen Mist. I told you we'd be seeing more of that Blasto advertisement. The Kree are coming in at him. He's fighting here with Carol. More fighting. More of it going on. Big Kree smashes his shield. He gets in there. So again, this looks really grim. What it turns out the Kree's plan is, and we don't know the full extent of it, but they are exposing normal humans to the Terrigen Mist. Terrigen Mist is what turns normal people into Inhumans. It basically, for anyone who has any kind of an X gene, it basically just kickstarts that and forces a mutation. So we get that fight. We get all of this. We found out, by the way, through that Carol never called anybody else. She only called Cap because she basically wanted to prove to him that she and him were enough to go ahead and stop this. Because at this point, again, she's going through a really hard time. and she wants to prove herself to Cap that she is enough, that the two of them are fine, that they don't need the rest of the Avengers. And it's basically an audition. Turns out, it's not great. Rocket's going away, they fire, they take her with them. She is important to them because she is half Kree. Cap's gonna never stop fighting. So, part 2. Finished off right there. Part 3. The weirdest part, and I would say probably the worst part, is this Quicksilver. So, Quicksilver in the 90s is a little bit weird. There's only about 16 or so issues that get produced, and it's across 3 different issues. This right here, this is just produced by John Ostrander. You may know him from probably the best Suicide Squad run ever produced. You may know him from The Spectre. You may know him from The Martian Manhunter. Famous comic artist, writer. This, not adding on to his legacy. So, again, we've got some weird things happening here. This issue, the only important thing you need to know is that it explains where the Terrigen Mist came from that they stole beforehand. So, at this point, Quicksilver's been hanging out with the Inhumans. He is married and then not married to Crystal, so a lot of things happen here. He's hanging out with Lockjaw. This is not a particularly important issue. This page right here, though, this is something worth seeing. To this point, Quicksilver was a knight of some kind of these weird animal people. So he's hanging out with this tiger dude, this kind of koala-y dude. It's all set up by the High Evolutionary. We see this cow knight right here named Bova. So, you know, cows and robes, that's pretty sweet. The High Evolutionary, or the Supreme Intelligence, I'm sorry, is apparently Quicksilver's adopted father. I don't really get that much, but this whole issue is just, hey, this is how the Kree stole the Terrigen Mist, and also Quicksilver is a failing series. More Blasto, so we need to have this all going. Also, we get back to the whole idea that Carol Danvers is an alcoholic. So at this point, she is just regular Carol, but she sees this Kree alcohol. How does she know it's Kree alcohol? I don't know. But he doesn't understand. None of them understand. Binary powers faded out. All I need is one drink, then I'll be alright. This looks like someone's personal bar. Being half Kree, their alcohol shouldn't hurt me. Just need a little something to stop the shakes, then I'll be okay. Then I can help. And she takes that. Whoa, that's better. Warbird is ready for action. It seems like it's fine. It's dripping down her face. Guess what? It's not going to be fine. Also, she's apparently bad enough that she is having withdrawal symptoms here, which, to this point, has not been established. So this is a big change. And just this one drink right here, and she is comically drunk right here. You can see, because the lettering is all shaky, that Warbird, stop! You're drunk, you're not in control. And she's firing randomly on them. She ends up hitting Lockjaw, and goes badly, and then eventually it, they all teleport away. And things go badly, but they get the Terrigen Mist. That's the whole point. This is by far the worst issue of Live, Kree or Die. But it's there. And then the last one that we have is Avengers number 7. This is part of the Kurt Busiek, George Perez Avengers run. And first off, can we look real quick at this amazing cover? I mean, this right here. This is astounding. George Perez at his finest. If you needed me to tell you George Perez is a good artist, I'm not the channel to watch. There are plenty more people who can tell you these things, but this is going to be the best artwork. As far as the art, it's by far George Perez, followed by Andy Kubert in Captain America, and then you can kind of do whatever, but
This is fantastic. So, subplot, not so important. The Supreme Intelligence who's been brought back, he's not fully on board with the Lunatic Legion's actions. They're basically a terrorist cell who are, we find out in this one, their whole plan is that they want to expose the entire human race through a bomb to the Terrigen Mist, and everybody will either die or they will be converted to half Kree, or not half Kree, but they will become Kree, just like Carol Danvers. And he's not into that, but he's kind of a floating head, so he doesn't really have much of a choice. Again, that's all in the background, because this story, at its heart, is a story about Carol Danvers when she's having a hard time. And so here we get the tribunal of Carol Danvers, or in this case, the court-martial of Carol Danvers. So the Avengers at this point, they all talk about their experiences with Carol. It's treated a whole lot more serious than the sort of comical, she takes one drink and it gets plastered in the last one, where they all talk about what her actions have meant to them. Cap recuses himself from heading this up. Thor takes it. And we get these moments where they talk to her about what it actually meant. And it's Kurt Busiek writing. Of course it's going to be good and, it's going to be treated with a personal touch. Then they go, oh yeah, by the way, we're still telling this story about the Kree. Carol senses that she's about to be reprimanded. She says she quits. She gets out of there. She leaves, and they fight the Kree. It's not important. Blasto, we're 4 for 4. If you don't remember Blasto, you're not alone. It was a PS1 game that was nothing, but they took out a whole bunch of double-page spreads. So probably not that useful. This is, again, I think this is useful. So here, she's sitting by herself. She talks about how angry she is. She wants to prove herself. All throughout this series, we see the idea that Carol is just there to try and prove herself. Thor drinks meat, doesn't he? Hawkeye drinks beer. She goes off. She goes into Warbird. I'm going to show them. They're all fighting. They do it. She's trying to force herself forward. She keeps trying. She doesn't have enough of a handle on her powers. She doesn't get there in time. They beat the Lunatic Legion. Doesn't really matter to the story, but they do it. They get that epilogue. Cap faces off against Supreme Intelligence, and he's like, hey, what's all this about? And he's like, why would you tell us exactly how to beat them? He's like, that's the question, isn't it? Obviously, Supreme Intelligence did not want the Lunatic Legion to destroy all of humanity. And then we get this final part right here, where Carol realizes they didn't need her. They didn't need her at all. Hey, Danvers, you've been sitting there staring at that drink for like 3 hours now. You gonna drink it or what? I don't know, Mitch. I don't know. And that's the end of it. We get this sweet Farley's Mega Monster Roll advertisement, and that is the end of the series. The end of Carol Danvers' introspection across 4 issues about a hard time she was going through and what it means for her to be a hero.
That's it. That is Live, Kree or Die. I really hope you guys enjoyed hearing about this, because honestly, this meant so much to me that Spooie sent this over to me. Because again, I have waited 25 years to read this crossover. I kind of thought I would never go. I thought I'd go my entire life without having ever read it. And then Spooie, just being stand-up dude that he is, sent all of this off to me, and I got to read it. So that's Live, Kree or Die. So I gotta ask, what did you guys think of Live, Kree or Die? How did you love those random animal nights from Quicksilver? What'd you think of randomly getting people being gassed by the Terrigen Mists in a non-consequential 4-part story? What does this mean to you? Love to hear about it in the comments. And then on top of that too, if there are any sort of unresolved storylines that you've had where, you know, much like this prior to Spooie sending this to me, if there are any kind of storylines that you have started but never finished, I'd love to hear about it and just kind of share that experience. So please, let me know down below. But in the meantime, I've been Bunkmaster B. You all have been amazing. Stay awesome. Catch you next time.